Chapter 2. Peg Kelly closed her eyes and inhaled the warm cinnamon sugar smells of the kitchen. Nibbling, she held a tiny bite of apple dumpling on her tongue to make the birthday treat last longer. Her mother smiled and winked. You needn't be afraid to gobble it down. There'll be more dumplings for supper tonight. Peg gulped and dipped her spoon into the flaky pastry for another bite. You're a good cook, Ma, and you're a good daughter, little love. I'm not little, I'm 11 now. Peg sat up defensively and squared her shoulders, as though she could will herself to add an inch or two to her height of 4 feet 8 inches. I'm practically grown. Noreen Kelly Murphy added wood to the fire in the cast-iron cook stove, picked up the heavy pan, which contained a fat hen, stuffed almost to bursting with a mixture of bread, crumbs, minced onion, and herbs. Peg's eyes gleamed. Roast chicken, too? Oh, yum. It wasn't often they were able to have meat. Both the Confederate and Union raiding parties helped themselves to farmers' stock and food supplies. There was precious little left for the stores to sell. As Ma tucked the chicken inside the oven, Peg heard the creak of the buggy wheels on the clop of the horse's hooves stop on the road outside their house. Someone come to visit? Ma asked and held aside the lacy curtain that hung over the kitchen window. Oh, merciful heavens, she cried. It's Frances Mary. Peg threw down her spoon and raced out the door, flinging it open and screeching, Frances, Frances, and wrapped herself in her big sister's hugs. Frances turned to greet Ma, who held her tightly over Frances's shoulder. Ma chattered on. It's been months since I've laid eyes on you, Frances Mary. And look at you, blooming with good health, praise be. How is my Petey? Did you bring him with you as well this time? He's well, isn't he? She craned her neck, staring toward the wagon. He's fine, Ma. I'm fine, and so are the Cummingses. Ma abruptly stopped speaking. In surprise, Peg followed her mother's gaze and saw a woman standing beside the wagon. She was pale. Her skin nearly matched the faded gray of her cotton dress and bonnet. Almost apologetically, she hung back, and when she met Peg's gaze, she smiled shyly and ducked her head. Frances, one arm still around her mother, turned toward the woman. Ma, Peg, I want you to meet Violet Hennessy. Miss Hennessy fled from her home in Lawrence, where Quantrill and his raiders burned the town. She needs a place to stay for a short while, Ma, so I brought her to you. And rightly so, Ma said without hesitation. She immediately took charge, sending Peg to plump the pillows on the bed in the spare room and fill the pitcher of fresh water. By the time Peg returned to the house, Frances had left the stable to stable the horse, and Ma had ushered Miss Hennessy into a chair by the fire. A cup of tea already in her trembling hands, Miss Hennessy murmured, It'll just be for a few days, just till I can find suitable lodgings. We're happy to have you stay with us, Ma reassured her. She pulled up a chair facing Miss Hennessy. Here in St. Joe, we hear about Quantrill's attack on Lawrence. It must have been terrifying. Eager to hear any of the details Miss Hennessy might offer, Peg took a step forward. She realized her mistake when Ma immediately spied her. Miss Hennessy's 2 carpet bags are on the floor by the door. Will you please take them to the room, Peg, my girl? One at a time now, 'cause they're heavy. But, Ma, I want to hear about the raid. Now, please, Ma said firmly. To argue in front of a guest would be unthinkable, so Peg silently turned and did as she was told, but inside she fumed. She sent me off on purpose, so I wouldn't hear. She treats me as if I'm a child, and I'm not. I'm close to becoming a full-grown woman. The first bag wasn't particularly heavy, but Peg lugged the second bag up the stairs with great difficulty. It was more scuffed than the first one, the flocking worn and stained at the corners. How did Miss Hennessy escape so quickly if she had to carry these 2 bags? Peg wondered, and then shrugged. By the time Peg returned to the kitchen, Frances had joined Ma and Miss Hennessy, who were now both spooning up a bowl of chicken broth. Peg glanced wistfully toward the apple dumplings that she had left. Her mouth watered for it, but it would be rude to eat if Miss Hennessy had not been served some, and she'd rather wait than give up any of her own portion at the moment. And your friend Johnny, Ma was asking Frances, is he also well? Frances's cheeks suddenly turned pink, and she stared down at her cup of tea. He writes when he can, she says. He's with the Kansas Volunteers. He's in my prayers, love, along with all the other young men who've gone off to fight. Ma patted Frances's shoulder. On the Union side, Peg said, and pulled up the chair. On both sides, Ma corrected. Ma, Peg was shocked. You can't pray for the Confederates. I'm praying for all the boys who have left their homes to fight for what they believe in, no matter if they're right or wrong, Ma said. They'll have mothers who lie awake at night worrying about them. But we're under martial law. The provost marshal arrests anyone who helps the enemy in any way. Ma laughed. Fortunately, the provost marshal has no way of knowing what's in my mind and heart. Frances smiled and reached over to hug Peg. Let Ma be. Today's your birthday, and I didn't forget. I brought you a bag of molasses taffy. Yum, Peg said. By that moment, Miss Hennessy gave a low moan and swayed in her chair. Ma and Frances jumped to their feet. Ma clutched Miss Hennessy's shoulder to keep her from falling. I'm sorry. Miss Hennessy's voice was so faint she could scarcely be heard. Maybe it's a long journey. I'm so tired. So tired. Then it's to bed with you, Ma said. A good sleep may be all you need. Don't even think of coming down to supper. I'll bring up a tray. Thank you, Miss Hennessy whispered. With Ma's help, she rose from the chair and stumbled from the room, supported by both Ma and Frances. Quick as a shot, Peg snatched her half-eaten apple dumpling and began to gobble it down. It was no longer warm, and the cream had soaked through the lower crust, but was still delicious. In a few moments, Ma and Frances came downstairs, pausing at the foot of the staircase to talk in low tones. Peg felt a lump in her throat as she watched her sister, whose dark, shining hair gleamed in the gleamed in the beam of late afternoon sunlight that came from the fanlight window over the front door. Frances had grown taller and even more beautiful, with her small waist and rounded hips. At 16 she'd become a lovely woman. Peg slid her hands over her own chest and grimaced. She wanted to look like Frances, to be as kind and loving as Frances, to be as brave as Frances, and when she risked her life to work for the Underground Railroad, helping slaves to escape to freedom. Besides, she thought, as she licked the last drop of cream from the bowl, by the time I'm 16, maybe Ma'll stop treating me like a child. Supper preparation soon began, and Peg helped by cutting pole beans into a pot for boiling and setting the table. Her stepfather, John Murphy, arrived home from the blacksmith shop. The shirt that stretched over his broad shoulders was stained with sweat. He greeted Frances warmly and raised his thick black eyebrows in surprise when told of their guest. "Were you acquainted with this woman before the raid?" he asked Frances. "No," she answered. "How'd she happen to go to the Cummingses for help?" "Pure fortune," Frances said. "She was on the road after dark and spied the lights of our house. She knocked on our door and asked us to take her in." "Who are her people? Where's she from?" "I can't tell you. I simply know Miss Hennessy's frightened and alone. She wants to leave Kansas, and I thought that Ma—" "Your Ma? Ah, yes, indeed," Mr. Murphy said with a frown. "She's good at taking in strays without thinking of the consequences. Just between you and us, there's no one else. Last week Noreen risked arrest by feeding a Union Army deserter who stopped and asked for food." Indignant, Ma thrust both hands on her hips. "It's not up to me to be judge and jury, John Murphy. All I saw was a frightened, hungry boy, who of no more of 16 years of age, if that much, curled up under the washtub in our backyard trying to get some sleep as he traveled homeward." John smiled and put an arm around Ma's waist, drawing her close. At one time, Peg, still missing the father she had lost, had resented John's open affection with Ma, but no longer. Over and over she saw that he sincerely loved Ma and was a good husband to her, and it was obvious that Ma loved him. "Tell me more about Miss Hennessy," John said to Frances. "I heard the raid took an entire town by surprise. How'd she manage to escape the raiders?" "A merchant with a horse and a wagon was fleeing Lawrence. He agreed to let her ride with him. It's not very fast transportation. A Reb on horseback could catch up with a wagon less than a minute." "They were ahead of the Rebs," Frances explained. "Violet left Lawrence from the north as the raiders entered the town from the south." "Interesting," he said. "How'd she learn they were coming?" Frances grew flustered. "I don't know. She was upset that we didn't bother her. I don't know. She was so upset we didn't bother her with questions. I suppose the people fleeing ahead of the raiders brought in the news." "John," Ma broke in, "stop ragging Frances. She brought Miss Hennessy here as an act of kindness because the poor woman was frightened. You get so curious you shake a bit of news to pieces the way a dog worries a bone." John shook his head sadly. "It's Quantrill I'd like to be shaken. The Lawrence raid was a terrible act of revenge on that evil man's part. Word has it Quantrill let his raider shine. Kill, kill. The man must be mad." John's news didn't surprise Peg. Marcus Hurd, who had undoubtedly the dirtiest, meanest boy in school, was nevertheless a good source of information. Told one day before class, Marcus had told him in gory detail what he'd heard about the collapse of the makeshift prison in Kansas City, in which many of the wives and women friends of Quantrill's men had been killed or badly wounded. Quantrill had vowed to get even. "Vinnie Ottman came by today to get his horse shod," John said. "Poor man was broken. Seems his cousin Frank was caught by a Union patrol, accused of spying for the Confederates, and hang on the nearest tree." "Oh dear," Ma said. I'll pay a call on Vinnie and Jane." "Why'd they hang him on the nearest tree?" Peg asked. "Why didn't they take him to jail?" "There's no quarter given to spies, my girl," Mr. Murphy said. "On both sides, if a spy's caught, he's immediately hung." With a concerned eye on Peg, Ma pulled away from her husband. "Enough of all this talk of war," she said. "Chicken's brown, the potatoes are baked. It's time to celebrate Peg's birthday with her favorite supper." The meal was every bit as delicious as Peg knew it would be. Afterward, Ma prepared a tray, taking it to Miss Hennessy herself, and Frances insisted on doing the cleaning up. Peg curled contentedly into a chair by the fire. Mr. Murphy had laid the whole brick fireplace in the parlor. This was not only a special day for Peg, there was a guest in the house, so the parlor would be ready for her use. How different from their usual routine of spending the evening at the kitchen table, Peg thought. Most evenings she'd be busy with schoolwork, Ma would have a lap full of mending, and John would go over every inch of the St. Joseph Gazette, bits and pieces of which he'd read aloud. As Peg stretched like a cat, sucking in a piece of taffy Frances had brought her, and luxuriating in the warmth from the fire, Ma came downstairs to report that Miss Hennessy had eaten every bite of her supper and had settled back into bed, ready once again to sleep. The colors come back in her face, Ma said with satisfaction as she placed her oil lamp on the table. "Rest and good food, she'll be herself in no time at all." Her gaze went from the small clock on the parlor table to Peg. "It's getting late. Time for bed, love," she said. "Ma," Peg complained, "I'm older now. I shouldn't have to go to bed at 8:30. Besides, it's my birthday." "Birthday or no birthday, you have school tomorrow," Ma replied. "I'm not sending you off to Miss Thomas to yawn in her face and stumble over your sums." She bent to kiss Peg on the forehead and put her on her feet. "Good night, love." "Ma, you don't treat me seriously," Peg complained. "I'm old enough to have a fair share of the cooking and cleaning, and a good job of it. Yet you send me off to bed as though I'm an infant. You're all going to talk about Miss Hennessy and the raid and her escape, and I want to hear it too." "No, you don't," Ma said. "Things have happened in that miserable war that are too horrible for young ears to hear and young minds to comprehend. But "Good night, Peggy, my love," Ma said. Her hug turned into a gentle push toward the stairs. Grumbling under her breath, Peg hurried outside through the cold night air to the privy, then taking one of the lamps, slowly climbed the stairs to her room, which was across from the head of the stairs. She poured cold water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face, and slipped into her nightgown and slid under the puffy quilt, pulling it through up to her chin. The bed was soon cozy with body warmth, and the distant hum of voices from the parlor made Peg drowsy. She closed her eyes and snuggled under the quilt and began to drift into sleep, but she was suddenly startled awake by the creak of floorboards in the hall outside her room.